I'm W. Kim Herron of WDET-FM and the Metro Times, and you're listening to Detroit JazzStage.
Welcome to Detroit JazzStage. I'm Rodney Reeves.
And I'm Jim Gallert. Today we'll have the pleasure of talking with Faruq Z, who's one of Detroit's prime creative forces and has been for several decades.
That's this month on Detroit JazzStage.
Glimpses of knowing, like my father was a progressive man of color, or a man of courage, gestures of grace in passant, shades of grace, Eliphian, shades of acts like I speak you, Nefer. Acts of worlds of grace like is Abyssinia, Abyssinia, Abyssinia. I speak you, and you are poem, never. Penumbra, if I did not want to communicate, I would not open my mouth or sing or further garble the litany. And you walk up to me in parties, stand waiting, accusing me. Why? When we have agreed that being deep is just a wait. Penumbra. When we have spoken you, poem. Never. When we have acted, words of grace, words of grace. In your name, Penumbra, with these things to sustain us in the throes of boredom, cigarettes and drinks, modes of evasion.
One of the most profound events in Faruq's life occurred in 1967. Actually, two profound events occurred in 1967. One was hearing John Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders live at the Drome Lounge on Dexter Avenue in Detroit. And the second was the Detroit riots, which took place in July of 1967. And from the ashes of those riots, there was a sense of possibility, and Detroit musicians and artists realized that they could do or be whatever they wanted to be. And this set up a whole new series of explorations, cultural explorations in our community. And Faruq really took hold. He'd always been a poet, but he started playing tenor saxophone. Most Detroiters today know Faruq as the leader of one of the best bands to never leave the city, as one writer put it. That was Griot Galaxy, a band that was influenced by and to some degree patterned after the orchestra of Sun Ra and also the art ensemble of Chicago. And they explored their directions and ideas in a number of Detroit clubs that came up in the 1970s as musical focal points. One was Cobb's Corner, located on Cass Avenue in Detroit's Cass Corridor, which was a pretty rough-hewn bar, as I remember it, but it became a center for Detroit jazz, and bands led by trumpeter Marcus Belgrave and organist Lyman Woodard played there, as well as Griot Galaxy. And that was where their concept really took hold first in the city, was at Cobb's Corner. One of the high points in their existence in the 1980s was in 1983 when the band played at the Detroit Institute of Arts, which at the time was hosting a series of jazz concerts that were absolutely wonderful. Unfortunately, tapes from that event were preserved and have recently been issued as a 2-CD set of Griot Galaxy material, and it's absolutely wonderful. Also in the early 1980s, another focal point for the Detroit music community and artistic community was public radio station WDET FM 101.9. At the time, there were a couple of jazz shows on WDET. I hosted one called Jazz Yesterday, and Faruq ended up getting a program on WDET, a very interesting program called Met Aesthetics, in which he would explore not only poetry but different aspects of music, and it was a really interesting and relevant program. So there were many good things going on in the late 1970s and early 1980s in Detroit, and we will talk today with Faruq Z not only about those years but also his activities since that time in the 1990s and even beyond, right up to today. Faruq, welcome to Detroit JazzStage. It's a great honor to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
And, I mentioned in the intro that a very profound event in your life was hearing John Coltrane in 1967, and maybe you could you tell us about that? What kind of an effect did it have on you? I mean, was it a visceral effect, or did you just appreciate it, or how much did it actually impact you?
It impacted me to the core, to my core anyway, my personal core. I'd never heard any music that profound. And I've always been into music ever since I was a kid, but it reaches fullest expression then with John Coltrane and Pharaoh Sanders with that group, with Alice and Rashid Ali and Jimmy Garrison. And it just shook me to my root. I never heard anything that deep before.
What did it actually make you do, or what changed after you heard them?
My whole attitude about music. I'd been studying bass in high school. And, James Tatum, as a matter of fact, was my teacher. And then I had been doing outside studies with my cousins who were bebop musicians, Charles and Eddie Rowland. And I was approaching the whole musical thing from one angle until I heard that, till I heard Train and at the drum bar, and it just changed my whole outlook, And it affected me intellectually and spiritually. It was like one of those core movement things. And that's when I realized that the real expression of what has come to be called music, the real expression is a totally unifying force, a unifying energy, that brings all the aspects of your existence into being, into play. And I saw that clearly when I saw Train and Pharaoh at that place.
Had you been aware of Train before you saw him live?
Oh yeah, I'd heard him on records. I've been seeing him. I've been following him for several years. I'd seen him at in the Miles Davis group at the minor key, and I saw him with the quartet, the classic quartet, in several instances. I saw that. Every time they came to Detroit, I'd go find him wherever he was and try to observe it. But it's just that one seemed to have more force. But then, he had kind of looped me into his evolution, so I was on that track, I was following his development.
Was it hard for you to find like-minded musicians at that point in time?
Well, see, that scene, everybody appreciated Train for the giant that he was. If it wasn't for the new things that he was doing, which everybody didn't agree with, it was for what he had done in the past, because his track record just overwhelmed, everybody else's, historical library and stuff. He just overdid it. He's just too good, Everybody knew who he was, but everybody didn't follow where he had gone. I didn't have any choice, because I came into it as a babe, naked. So, my little aesthetic contours hadn't formed totally. In other words, I was following him absolutely. He was like, okay, whatever you say, Mr. Coltrane.
Now, you were playing bass up until the time you heard
Yeah,
Coltrane.
yeah.
How did you get on to playing bass? I mean, was this, did a teacher just give it to you and say, we need a bass player in the band, or?
Well, like I said, my cousins were, two excellent musicians, but they were into the bebop thing, the entire bebop lifestyle, as a matter of fact. And I looked up to them. They were like my older brothers or whatever in the family. And I looked up to them and respected them. So I wanted to play something. And so I took up bass, Couldn't afford a saxophone or any of those, really deep, complicated instruments. But I could borrow the school bass. So I approached it that way, and then I stayed with it till I was 18. And then I joined the Air Force with the intention of buying an electric bass, because I had heard Wes Montgomery and his brother Monk Montgomery. And Monk Montgomery played an electric bass, which was like a wonder of technology. But I played some gigs while I was in the Air Force, And, with bands on the bass and stuff, and we do little gigs downtown and stuff. But after I got out, I just kind of went into a little hole under a rock and studied, I was, getting some instructions and general directions from, like I said, my cousins regarding that whole thing. And like I said, I became one of the, a dedicated trainite, I just followed training, whatever context he was in. I like to say I heard my favorite things, and I realized I couldn't play that on the bass. so I got a saxophone.
How did you actually go about learning to play the tenor saxophone?
I did like everybody else. I practiced, and I got teachers, instructors. My first instructor was a guy named Hank Hance. It was like, one of those, he showed me as having one of those Ben Webster type tones and approaches, but he's really off in the Sonny Rollins real heavy, And he was a good instructor. He gave me good, good bases to come from, and then I went from him to Leon Henderson.
Now, this is Joe's older brother.
Right, and I studied with him. And he really opened me up, because he opened me up to a lot of the possibilities, to theoretic and technical possibilities. Like he exposed me to people like Joseph Schillinger, and that approach to it, where the music was, greater than a set of accrued traditions. You have to do this if you do that type thing, or why. That's another question. The point is, don't ask why, just do it. That was the tenor of the traditional teaching. It goes like this. Why? Because they did it like this in the past, so that's why. And Leon opened me up. I still ask why, but this way I could, find answers, or at least, things that worked as answers.
Jim mentioned the significance of the riots here in Detroit. Could you describe politically and socially really what was going on before the riots really hit? What it was like to live in Detroit?
First of all, when the riot happened, we were having an observation, a John Coltrane observation thing going on. We were celebrating some aspect of Train's trip here on the planet. And we do it every year. We'd be up all night just listening to Coltrane and, celebrating his being. The situation in Detroit was like any other southern town north of the Mason-Dixie line.
Right.
It was rough for black people, and it was an institutionalized, entrenched, method of if not overt oppression, just, or repression, smothering. And the riot was simply a reaction to that, reaction to police violence, a reaction to, the whole, undercurrent of an unhealthy political attitude in the city, in the area. It was inevitable, really.
So out of the riots also came a lot of cultural transformations. One of those was your first tenor, right?
Oh, yeah.
And share with our listeners how that came about, if you don't mind.
It wasn't a direct, I didn't liberate it during the riot. My mind was liberated, my spirit was liberated. That was enough, I bought the saxophone.
When I hear your playing, it sounds very conversational, and I'm kind of wondering if you place an importance on different intervals or maybe patterns of notes to relay certain emotion.
Of course, the whole point is that it sounds conversational because music, end quote, is derived from speech, which is conversation. The only valid speech is in converse, one speaking to another. And music is a mode of expression, what we can't call music. Because in other cultures in the world, in tonal languages, for instance, like in African languages, which is where jazz is derived from, there's a linear evolution from the African tonal language. And in Chinese and Asian languages, in Southern European languages like Greek and Italian, and I've read isolated spots in the Alps. That they speak a tonal language where interval has meaning. Interval lends meaning to a vowel consonant chain. In that the interval changes the meaning of a vowel consonant. If you really start listening to English as a tonal language, you'll find that very often when a question is asked, the voice of the speaker usually goes up by a tritone.
Right.
Because the tritone implies a question. The tritone, or flat five, is a sonic question mark. You know what I'm saying? Or we return to the so-called one, in the harmonic chord sequence, situation. Return to the one is inflexive of peace, of correctness, of resolution, if you will. And interval has a different meaning in a tonal language environment than it does in the musical environment. The interval in the musical environment is abstract, because it is separated from meaning. It's divorced from meaning. It's just, pleasant or unpleasant. When you see it, and you approach it from that attitude, then you find that, like the flat five always indicates instability. See, whereas a physics property in waveform, the flat five challenges the tonic. You know what I'm saying? Because it's exactly antithetical to it. It's the exact opposite of the tonic.
Right.
So it becomes another tonic. So it challenges it. So that's what a question does. It challenges the reality as you present it. It's like, are you sure?
Right. The antitonic.
You see? There it is.
in listening to, I remember hearing Griot Galaxy, and all the instruments. I mean, I felt often as if I was eavesdropping on a conversation.
That's beautiful.
You know,
That's to me, that's the ultimate expression. That's exactly where the music is supposed to go. You know, what we call music. You know, that's where it's supposed to go. You're supposed, the player, the performers are supposed to be able to react on that level. You know, act and interact on that level. I think that's what it's all about.
So much of this has been about language. You know, you're talking about the intervals, and now you're talking about really Griot Galaxy. The word griot comes from, isn't that the person in Africa that keeps track of the history and really the language?
Yeah, well, griot is a French term because the native term, the indigenous term for it is a family called the jelly. That where they are, if not the only griots, they are the most well-known, the most profound griots. The jelly, and what they are verbal historians. They keep track of the history of the people, of the community, and they express it. They also, because of the musicality of that language that they speak, which is often Wolof or a sub-dialect of that. Because of that, and they're so musical, they interact with music and with the they play a lot of kora and that sort of thing.
So Griot Galaxy, then you were offering a history, or maybe even a forward history, a future history.
Exactly. It was taking a page. It was like somewhere I talk about verbal equations. And it was taking a page from the Art Ensemble of Chicago, great black music, ancient to the future. Just encapsulating the whole thing. So it's like this is part of this an evolutionary, plateau, in the development of you did.
When we were driving up here, you played for me a Charlie Parker track that you said, a tune you were trying to learn. What music do you listen to? Just as you carry around CDs with you. I mean, what kind of stuff do you listen to? Just as in a normal day, if there is such a thing.
Oh boy. I listen to a whole lot of people. I go through these periods, like I'm listening to Bird a lot now, and that tune, If I Love Again, it just caught me, just the melody, just the little, the little ditty, It's a sweet little tune. I like it, and it's simple. See, I'm trying to refine my sense of aesthetics too, my whole aesthetic principles, and one of them is it's got to be simple first. It's simple first, and then, I guess I learned that, better will no harm, as they used to say, from John Coltrane, because he would take a simple statement and make it the most dense, complex thing you could ever think of. Couldn't believe it. He would take a tune and just ring it out. All the legendary solos he'd take that would be less than 45 minutes and so forth. He's just taking the same principle, the same, sequences, and just ringing them out till there's no other possible, combination going on with them. To me, that's really powerful. But anyway, yeah, I like that tune. But it's like. I go through these periods where I'm listening to Bird now, and I'll listen to Train, and I ran across some old Weather Report stuff, and I started listening to that real heavy, and now I listen to John Cage, I like him because he's interesting, I like cats that are in the sound for sound's sake, not so much music. Yada yada.
Right. How about Albert Ayler?
I love him. He's a giant. He's immense. I love him.
Your song off your one of your CDs. When I first heard it, I thought I was listening to Amazing Grace. I heard it. It sounds like a spiritual to me. It's simple and gorgeous. Mm-hmm. So, How is it that you came upon that kind of song for his music?
Because that's the way his music strikes me.
Oh, okay.
It's always, if you notice, his stuff has that kind of, it's folky, spiritual, religious type of feel. You know, that little edge going on. And it's usually simple, and he plays these little, you know, these pretty little, you know, sequences and stuff. And then when the text is over, you know, when the ensemble section is over, then he starts playing it again only 3 times as fast and 3 times higher on the saxophone, totally off the saxophone in another octave range and stuff. So he's an immense talent, and the cat's incredible. He's incredible. I love it.
Faruq, we'd like to thank you very much for coming on to Detroit JazzStage with us and talking about music and life and John Coltrane and Detroit with us. It's been a great honor.
Yeah, it's a great show. We're very happy to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For information about Faruq Z and how to purchase his recordings, please visit entropystereo.com and northwoodsimprovisers.com.
I'm Rodney Reeves from JazzStage Productions. If you enjoy listening to Detroit JazzStage, we encourage you to leave your comments on iTunes. Doing so will help promote our show and keep us bringing quality shows to your iPod.
Detroit JazzStage is produced at Longview Sound in Metro Detroit for JazzStage Productions. Mark Byerly is our producer and sound engineer. Dean Sahutsky is the executive producer. Your hosts are Rodney Reeves and Jim Gallert.